He stepped into her bakery like a ghost from the past, kind and hiding something. She hired him out of desperation, not knowing he once held her husband's life in his hands. Now, as the oven breaks and a buried truth rises, one question lingers: can love survive the flames of the past? Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. The scent of cinnamon and butter wafted through the tiny bakery, curling into the December air like a promise. Claire Bennett, flour smudged on her cheek, wiped her hands on her apron and glanced at the ever-growing line of holiday customers. It was only 9:30 a.m. and her third batch of gingerbread cookies had just come out of the oven, burnt around the edges. Again? "Minute," she called out, juggling trays, receipts, and a crying toddler whose mother was apologizing profusely at the counter. Claire leaned forward with a forced smile, her voice calm but frayed. "We'll have your order ready shortly. I'm so sorry." The toddler shrieked again, and the mother looked ready to burst into tears. That's when it happened. Soft footsteps, then a calm, steady voice that cut through the noise like a balm. "Would it be okay if I showed him a gingerbread man?" a man asked gently. Claire turned. A tall stranger in a worn gray hoodie stood beside the counter, his posture relaxed but respectful. The toddler's eyes lit up as the man crouched, offering a cookie from the display jar. The child clutched it instantly, wide-eyed, then quieted as if hypnotized. The room seemed to exhale all at once. Claire blinked. "Thank you," she said, still holding a notepad in one hand and tongs in the other. The stranger nodded. "Didn't mean to interfere, just figured it might help." The mother mouthed "thank you" over her child's head, then paid and left, grateful and lighter. Claire sighed. "You got a name?" Gingerbread Whisperer. He smiled faintly. Jack Rowan." She tilted her head, studying him. His coat was a bit too thin for the weather, and his hands bore faint calluses, not quite a baker's but used to labor. "You're looking for work?" she asked impulsively. "Because I need help. Holiday rush is eating me alive." Jack hesitated. "I don't have a resume." "Don't need one. Can you lift 50 pounds of flour and smile without threatening anyone?" "I can manage that." Claire offered her hand across the counter. "Claire Bennett, owner, baker, and chaos coordinator." His grip was warm and firm. "Nice to meet you." By the time the lunch crowd hit, Jack was behind the counter, tying boxes, helping refill coffee, and lifting trays from the kitchen like he'd been born into the place. Customers were curious. Who was the new guy? But Claire had no time to explain. She just noticed things ran smoother with Jack nearby, and her hands, usually trembling by noon, were steady as she pipped holiday messages onto cupcakes. At 6:00 p.m., Claire locked the front door and turned the sign to closed. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion pressing down like wet snow. Jack was wiping down a table without being asked. She watched him move, quiet, efficient, respectful, like someone trying hard not to take up too much space. "You didn't tell me where you're staying," she said. He looked up. "Nowhere far? Just around." Claire narrowed her eyes. "You mean you're sleeping rough?" Jack didn't answer. Instead, he picked up a box of unused pastry bags and walked into the back. That night, Claire returned after forgetting her scarf. The bakery was dim, save for a single bulb in the kitchen. The scent of dough lingered in the air, warm and soft. As she stepped in, something made her pause. From the storeroom, muffled by the flour bags and winter coats, came a voice, Jack's, faint and shaky. "Aaliyah, not again, please." Claire stood frozen. Jack was asleep on the storage cot she'd once used for late shifts, tangled in a blanket, whispering into the dark. He clutched a photo in one hand, and in that photo, thought she couldn't make out the faces, was a boy. Claire quietly stepped back, locking the door behind her with a soft click. Tomorrow, she'd ask nothing, just offer him warm coffee and a clean apron. The next morning, The first thing Jack saw was a steaming mug of coffee waiting on the counter beside a fresh croissant wrapped in parchment. Claire didn't say anything when he walked in from the back, only lifted her chin toward the drink. "Figured you'd need it." Jack murmured a quiet thanks. The scent of cinnamon and nutmeg rose from the croissant like a memory. He didn't ask how she knew he'd been there all night. Claire didn't ask why. By noon, they were elbow-deep in flour and frosting, working like they'd done this for years. Jack learned quickly, faster than most seasonal hires Claire had taken on in the past. He measured by instinct, rolled dough with a rhythmic calm that soothed even the tensest lunch hour, and never complained when customers snapped or when Claire barked instructions mid-rush. What caught her most, though, was how Jack handled people. A grumpy elderly man who always scowled at her lemon tarts suddenly complimented the crust. A shy teenager struggling with card payment smiled when Jack slid him a wrapped cookie and said, "On the house, first heartbreaks hurt worse than sugar high." Claire noticed how Jack's kindness wasn't loud. It was in the way he offered, not imposed. In the way he watched, not judged. And yet, behind his gentle eyes, there was always a shadow. That evening, as Claire wiped down the counter and tallied receipts, Jack sat in the back corner reading a worn children's book aloud to a little girl who'd been waiting for her mother to pick her up. The girl giggled when he changed his voice for each character, and Claire couldn't help but watch from the kitchen doorway, chest tightening. She hadn't seen anyone do that since her husband. After closing, Claire lingered, Logan longer than necessary. Jack stayed too. He didn't sleep again in the storeroom, but she suspected he would if she didn't leave first. As she pulled on her coat, she finally said what had been circling her mind all day. "You're good with people." Jack gave her a half smile. "People don't scare me. It's their silences that do." Claire paused, heart catching on the edge of his words. "What do you mean?" He looked down at the coffee mug between his hands. "I used to think if I was quiet enough, I'd hear what I lost. But silence? It doesn't give things back. It just reminds you they're gone." Claire nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch between them, not to bury him, but to give him room. "You don't have to tell me your story," she said softly. "Not unless you want to. But I've got a cot, clean sheets, and a home-cooked meal if you ever get tired of pretending you're just passing through." Jack didn't answer at first. His fingers curled around the mug, and his jaw twitched like he was fighting back something. A memory. A name. Then he whispered, "Liam." His name was Liam. Claire didn't ask who Liam was. She just said, "Come back tomorrow. We're rolling out the spiced pecan pies." A breath of a laugh escaped him. "I'll be here." As she walked out into the night, snow beginning to fall, Claire glanced back once. Through the bakery window, Jack sat alone, the children's book still open in his lap, his eyes fixed on something far away, but no longer lost. The next morning, the bakery filled with the comforting scent of vanilla and brown sugar. Claire was already elbow-deep in batter when Jack walked in, his sleeves rolled, eyes quieter than usual. He'd shown up early, earlier than anyone should. "You slept here again," Claire said without turning. He offered a shrug and a faint smile. Didn't want to miss the morning rush. Claire didn't press. She handed him a mixing bowl, flour dusting the tips of her fingers. "I want to try something." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" She hesitated, dropping her voice. "Cinnamon rolls." For a moment, his hands stilled. He could tell it meant something. Claire hadn't made those since something. He didn't ask what, but he could see it in her eyes, the pull of a memory she wasn't sure she was ready to relive. Still, Jack followed her lead. He worked beside her, kneading dough and measuring cinnamon with careful precision. When the mixture was just right, Claire leaned over, inhaled, and closed her eyes. Her lips trembled. "Always said I made them too soft," she murmured, brushing flour from her apron. "But then he'd sneak 3 riff before they cooled." Jack said nothing. He didn't have to. That day, the cinnamon rolls disappeared faster than anything they'd ever baked. Even Claire couldn't deny it. Jack had a gift. His hands moved with practiced skill, as if he'd learned from years in kitchens, or maybe from someone who once taught him with love. By late afternoon, thick clouds rolled over the town, casting a shadow through the windows. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of damp leaves and distant thunder. Claire glanced up at the flickering light overhead. "You ever worked a storm shift?" she asked. Jack smiled faintly. "Can't say I have." "Well, welcome to it. Around here, we bake until the power gives out." Just after 7, it did. The lights blinked once, twice, then vanished. Claire cursed softly under her breath as Jack lit the lanterns from behind the counter. He moved with ease in the dark, lighting each one until a warm amber glow spread across the kitchen. "I've got an old camping stove," Claire said, "enough to heat the glaze." They worked side by side, shadows dancing on the walls, the smell of warm cinnamon weaving through the air like a lullaby. The sound of rain began to patter against the windows, gentle at first, then steady, rhythmic, like a memory knocking at the door. Claire leaned against the counter, holding her mug in both hands. The lantern light caught the edge of her expression, and something softened in her. "To love storms," she said. "When Mason was alive, we'd sit on the porch and listen. He'd say, 'Thunder was just God moving the furniture.'" Jack chuckled under his breath. "That's a good one." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "He died in a fire, 2 years ago this week. Bakery caught one night. He ran back in for a recipe box. I told him it didn't matter, that I'd rewrite every recipe, but he didn't listen." Jack froze, fingers tightening around the towel in his hands. Claire went on, staring into the rain. "He found the box, threw it out the back window. But he didn't make it out." The silence between them was heavy, but not suffocating. Just honest. "From this girl," Ukraine said, "that I didn't bake cinnamon rolls anymore," she whispered. Jack's throat bobbed. "He sounds like he was brave." "It was stupid," Claire said, a sad smile on her lips, "and brave. Sometimes the same thing." The rain tapped louder, as if echoing something unspoken. Jack looked away, toward the darkened street beyond the glass. He started, then stopped. Jack didn't finish what he was about to say. Instead, he grabbed his coat and nodded toward the door. "I'll take the trash out before the storm gets worse." Claire watched him go, a strange weight lingering in the air. His footsteps echoed across the empty sidewalk, then faded into the curtain of rain falling steadily from the sky. Outside, Jack moved like a man on autopilot. He tossed the trash into the bin, then leaned against the side of the building, letting the rain soak through his shirt. The chill didn't seem to bother him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Carefully, he slid out a burned photograph, edges charred, faces half erased by smoke and time. But the eyes were still visible, bright, young, trusting. A woman and a boy. Their smiles haunted him more than the fire ever could. He brushed a drop of water from the photo, but it didn't matter. The damage was done, just like it was in real life. He closed his eyes, whispering their names under his breath. Names that didn't belong to this town. Names he hadn't spoken aloud in months. Inside the bakery, Claire dried her hands and glanced toward the window. Through the haze of fogged-up glass, she saw Jack, standing in the storm like he was asking the rain to wash something away. She opened the door and called out, "You'll catch a cold." He turned but didn't move. "I mean it," she said, stepping outside under the small awning. "You might be good at pastries, but I'm not nursing you through a fever." Jack offered a weak smile and walked back, dripping water onto the doormat. Claire handed him a towel. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice softer now. He hesitated, then gave the only truth he could. "Some things stick with you." Claire nodded. "Yeah, they do." They went back inside. The lanterns still glowed, and the warmth of cinnamon still lingered in the air. Jack sat on the floor near the oven, clutching the towel, his soaked hair falling over his eyes. Claire poured 2 mugs of warm cider, handed one to him, then sat across from him. "I used to think grief had an expiration date," she said after a moment. "But it doesn't. It just settles differently." Jack looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something crack behind his quiet eyes. "I used to laugh too loud," he said. I used to laugh too loud, tell bad jokes, burn toast. Claire smiled. I don't believe that last part. He chuckled, just barely. But something happened, and I guess part of me burned with it. She didn't ask what. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached for the old recipe box she kept by the register. Slowly, she slid open the lid and pulled out a worn card. Cinnamon rolls, she said, holding it up. This is the one he ran back in for. Smells like smoke even now. Jack stared at it, silent. Toward anything. He knew, she whispered, that I'd need a reason to keep going. A reason to believe something sweet could still come out of all this. He swallowed hard. You're stronger than you think. Are you? She replied, then leaned in slightly. You ever think maybe this place found you, not the other way around? Jack didn't answer, but when Claire reached over and placed the card into his hands, he didn't let go. That night, long after the last cinnamon roll had cooled and the storm began to fade, Jack sat alone in the bakery with the recipe card resting beside the burned photograph. 2 stories, one charred by fire, one written in flour and second chances. He didn't sleep in the storeroom that night. He slept near the oven where it was warm. By midweek, the bakery's industrial oven let out a groan that echoed like a funeral bell. Claire stood, frozen, mittened hands trembling as she opened the iron door. Cold. No heat. Nothing. Now, she whispered under her breath, her eyes darting to the calendar marked with a red heart. The town's harvest festival was just 3 days away. The bakery's booth had been a staple for over a decade. Her husband once ran it beside her. Now, the thought of disappointing the town and tarnishing his memory tied her stomach in knots. Jack wiped flour from his hands and came around the counter. Want me to take a look? Claire hesitated. It's gas-fed and ancient, probably needs a professional. Jack crouched beside the oven, tilting his head. So am I. With sleeves rolled and tools fetched from the back room, Jack set to work. Claire busied herself mixing batter, trying not to stare as he moved with unexpected precision, like someone who had rebuilt more than appliances in his life. By noon, the oven purred again. Claire clapped her hands, laughing. You did it. How did you? Let's just say, I've fixed worse. His smile was faint, distracted. Later that afternoon, the bell above the door jingled. A woman in her mid-30s stepped in, autumn scarf, sunglasses, and a stunned look that stopped Jack mid-step. Sarah, he said, voice lower now. Her lips parted. You're not dead. Claire dropped a measuring spoon. The clang snapped the moment like glass. What did she say? Sarah removed her glasses, eyes wide. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Her gaze darted between them before she backed toward the door. Forget I came. The bell chimed again as she vanished. Claire turned to Jack, pulse pounding in her throat. What was that? Jack rubbed the back of his neck. I can explain. Then do it. He exhaled slowly, as though peeling off layers he'd hidden for too long. My name used to be something else. Years ago, I testified against someone powerful, someone dangerous. It cost me everything, my family, my friends, even my name. They moved me, gave me a new identity, witness protection. Claire's mouth was dry. Why here? I didn't choose it, I just kept running, until the noise quieted and this town felt like the first place that didn't ask for explanations. You lied, she said, voice cracking. All this time, you let me believe. I didn't let you believe anything, Jack interrupted gently. I just didn't correct the picture, because I didn't want it to break. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. You were starting to matter to me. You still matter to me, Jack said. More than you know. She shook her head. But I don't even know who you are. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photo. A family, him, younger, smiling, arms around a little boy. He had a brother, he said quietly. He died because I waited too long to tell the truth. I promised I wouldn't make that mistake again. Claire looked down at the photo, then back at him. Her voice was hollow. You need to go. Jack didn't argue. He simply nodded, walked into the back, and began packing his things. The flour-dusted countertops suddenly felt too clean. The cinnamon in the air smelled more like grief than comfort. Jack moved with quiet resignation, folding his apron with care, as if trying not to disturb the memories clinging to the fabric. Claire stood by the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, watching with a storm of emotions behind her eyes. "You weren't just a stranger," she finally said. "You were safety, stability. You made this place feel alive again." Jack paused. "That was never a lie, Claire." She blinked, heart twisting. "But you should have told me. You could have trusted me." "I wanted to," he said, slipping the photograph into his duffel bag. "But when you spend years hiding, it's hard to believe anyone can see you and not run." His honesty cut deeper than anything. Claire turned away, staring at the wall where flour smudges hadn't yet been cleaned. "That woman, Sarah, who is she?" "She used to live in my old neighborhood. She thought I died in the explosion that ended it all." He closed the zipper slowly. "I let her think that. Safer for everyone." Claire walked toward the counter, placing both hands on its edge to steady herself. "So, you were part of something dangerous?" Jack nodded. "Not by choice. I was young, stupid, but when I realized the cost, I tried to make it right. That's when everything fell apart. They put me in witness protection, but the system doesn't fix your soul, just changes your zip code." The rain outside began again, soft at first, like a lullaby no one asked for. Jack lifted his bag over his shoulder. "It'll disappear tonight. No trouble. You won't have to explain anything to anyone." Claire's lips parted, but she couldn't find the words. The part of her that had hardened after loss wanted him gone, but the other part, the one that had slowly thawed since Jack arrived, was screaming to stay. "I don't know what hurts more," she whispered, "that you lied or that I believed in you." He approached her, slowly, carefully, like a man unsure of his right to stand in her light. "You still can, maybe not now, maybe not soon, but I'm not the man I used to be. You changed me." Claire's voice broke. "Then why are you walking away?" Jack held her gaze. "Because the last thing I want is to break something I helped rebuild." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was her cinnamon roll recipe, the one she hadn't made since her husband died. She'd written it on the back of a receipt months ago, when she thought she'd never need it again. "Made a copy," he said, "not to take, just to remember what healing tastes like." Then he opened the door, letting the storm wind hit his face. Without another word, he stepped into the night. Claire stood still for a long moment. Then slowly she walked to the oven Jack had repaired, still warm. She touched the handle, felt the lingering heat, and shut her eyes. The bakery was quiet now, but not empty. She opened the folded recipe and stared at the faded ink. Beneath her handwriting was a single line Jack had added in his sharp block letters. "For what was lost and for what still can be found." Claire's breath hitched. Somewhere in the darkness outside, Jack was disappearing again. But maybe, just maybe, not for long. The note was folded neatly, its edges frayed as though Jack had handled it too many times before finally placing it on the counter. Claire found it the morning after he vanished. His cot in the storeroom was empty, his duffel bag gone, but the air still carried the scent of cinnamon and something else she couldn't quite place. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the letter. It began simply, "Claire, I never meant to stay this long." She sank into the nearest chair as her eyes scanned the next lines. "You gave me kindness when I didn't deserve it. A job, a roof, but most of all, you gave me a chance to feel human again. I've kept a secret, not out of cruelty, but out of cowardice. Years ago, I was a firefighter. I worked in Chicago. One of my last calls was a house fire on Wilson Street. Your husband was inside." Claire's breath caught. "I'd tried. God, I tried. But the roof caved in, and I was pulled back by my captain. I was injured, blamed by the department for not calling it sooner, and eventually I left. Broken, ashamed. I never forgot your name. I never forgot that night." The rest of the words blurred behind her tears. Claire pressed the paper to her chest, as though it could still be ache. Her first instinct was rage. How dare he come into her life, into her bakery, into her heart without telling her this? But beneath the hurt was a confusion she didn't know how to name. Wasn't it her grief that had burned everything down? And yet, hadn't Jack helped build something in the ashes? The next days passed in a fog. Claire opened the bakery, took orders, kneaded dough, but her hands moved without memory. The oven, still broken, sat cold. She didn't have the heart to fix it. And one gray morning, she heard footsteps behind her after closing. Her back stiffened. "We're closed," she called out without turning. "No," came the voice, his voice. Claire turned, and there he was. Jack stood at the door, soaked from the rain, his eyes exhausted but steady. He held a toolkit in one hand, a bakery bag in the other. "I came to finish what I started," he said quietly. "I never meant to leave like that." She stared at him, silent. "I read your letter," she finally said, her voice low. Every word carved something open. "And I don't know what I'm supposed to feel." Jack nodded slowly, placing the toolkit on the counter. "You don't have to forgive me. I didn't come back for that. I just needed to fix the oven, that's all." She watched him as he moved to the back, as if he had never left. There was no argument, no shouting, just the soft hum of tools and the rhythmic clank of metal on metal. Claire remained frozen near the front, heart pounding with a mixture of sorrow, fear, and something else, an emotion so raw she dared not name it. An hour passed, maybe two. Then, the rich aroma of lemons and sugar drifted through the bakery. Claire stepped into the kitchen. Jack stood beside the now glowing oven, pulling out a tray lined with delicate, golden tarts. Her lemon tart recipe, the one she hadn't touched since Noah's. "You remembered," she whispered. "I memorized it the day you taught me," Jack said. It felt like more than a recipe, like a memory, like healing. Claire approached slowly, picked up one of the tarts, still warm. She took a bite. The flavors hit her all at once. Sweet, tart, delicate, her eyes stung, her throat closed, and then the tears came, fast and uncontrollable. She set the tart down with shaking hands. "It's the first thing I've eaten in years that didn't taste like grief," she whispered. Jack didn't speak. He didn't move closer. He just waited. Claire stood there for a long moment, her breathing uneven as the tears continued to fall. Jack looked down, his hands clenched by his sides. The silence between them stretched like a fragile thread, taut, trembling, on the verge of snapping. "I never wanted to cause you more pain," Jack finally said. "That night ruined 2 lives, yours and mine. But when I walked into your bakery and saw how much light still lived here, despite everything, I wanted to be near it, even if I didn't deserve to be." Claire sank onto the bench beside the cooling oven, wiping her cheeks with the edge of her apron. "You're right, you didn't deserve to be, but neither did I deserve to carry so much bitterness for so long. My husband, he was a good man, but he's gone, and I've been standing still in his shadow." Jack stepped forward, slowly giving her space. "What you've built here, Claire, it's beautiful. Not because it's perfect, because you kept it alive. You kept yourself alive." She looked at him now, really looked, the way his shoulders curved slightly inward, as though the weight of the past never quite left. The way he stood there, not asking for forgiveness, just presence. It was so different from anyone she'd known. "I didn't know how to let go," she admitted, "but somehow you walked into my life with your burned hands and silent grief, and you helped me remember what warmth feels like." A tear rolled down Jack's cheek. He made no move to hide it. "I think I've been searching for redemption in the wrong places. I thought disappearing would protect people, but maybe facing the wreckage is what really sets you free." They sat in silence, the aroma of lemon and sugar wrapping around them like a soft blanket. Outside, rain tapped gently against the bakery windows. Claire stood and walked to the sink, rinsing her hands. Then she reached for a second tart on the tray. "Seat," she said, glancing at Jack. He hesitated before joining her at the small wooden table. She pushed the tart toward him. "You made it. You should taste it." He took a bite. His eyes closed and his shoulders eased just slightly. "Still not as good as yours," he murmured. Claire smiled faintly. That's because mine have 12 years of pain folded into the crust. Yours are just... He looked at her now, really looked. So what happens next? Claire's breath caught. She didn't know. But for the first time, not knowing didn't feel terrifying. It felt open, like a window cracked in spring. You keep working here if you still want to, she said. You keep baking, fixing things, and we take it one day at a time. Jack nodded slowly. I'd like that. She stood and crossed to the pantry, pulling out a jar of raspberry jam, Noah's favorite. She set it on the counter beside the dough bowl. Tomorrow, she said, we try. He smiled. With jam? Hope, she answered. As they cleaned the kitchen together, Claire noticed how the silence between them no longer hurt. It breathed. It carried the weight of what they had survived, what they had confessed, and what they might become. Later, after Jack had gone to the back to put away tools, Claire stepped outside into the misty evening. The town square was quiet, the distant glow of string lights still hanging from the festival that had come and gone. She looked up at the sky. I don't know why you left me, Noah, she whispered, but someone walked into this broken place and brought something back I thought I'd buried with you. Maybe you sent him, maybe he just found me. Either way, thank you. Behind her, Jack opened the door and waited silently, watching her. She turned, eyes rimmed with tears, and held out a hand. He took it, and they walked back inside, toward the warmth, the flower, and the life waiting to rise. Jack stood in the far corner of the kitchen, his hand brushing over the newly fitted oven knobs. The scent of warm dough clung to the walls like a memory, but something in the room felt heavy. Claire dried her hands on a towel and finally said what had lingered between them for days. You never told me what happened that night. Jack turned slowly. He didn't avoid her gaze this time. He pulled out the stool by the prep table and sat down. Claire sat across from him, her heart thudding in her chest, not from anger, but from the ache of truth waiting to rise. He cleared his throat, voice low and uneven. It was a house fire, a 2-story on maple and birch. I was the last one inside. We'd pulled 2 kids and a grandmother out already. Then, we heard someone yelling. It was your husband, Noah. Claire stiffened, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. He was trapped in the kitchen. Collapsed beam, smoke everywhere. I reached him, he was still breathing. I called for backup and tried to drag him out, but... Jack swallowed. The floor gave out, just gone. I fell through, landed in the basement. I broke my arm. They pulled me out an hour later. By then, the roof had collapsed. Claire covered her mouth with one hand, her eyes filled, not with rage, but with something more fragile. Grief with edges softened by time and understanding. Jack continued, voice shaking. I gave my report, but I didn't know your name. I didn't know who he was until months later. I saw the photo in a memorial article, your face, the bakery name. I kept it with me. That's the picture in my wallet. He reached into his back pocket and unfolded a singed photo, the newspaper clipping. Claire saw her own face next to Noah's, both smiling in front of the bakery's grand opening banner. Carried it like a weight. And then, after testifying in another case, I asked to disappear. Witness protection. The people I helped put away had power, and I needed somewhere to go. A new name, a quiet life. I didn't expect that life to bring me back to you. Claire reached for the photo, her hand trembling slightly. You tried to save him, she whispered. His eyes, and he said, no. The words cracked something open in her. For so long she had imagined that night in fragments, flames, a body bag. She had never been given details, never known how close someone had come. And now, sitting across from her, was the man who had risked everything for someone he didn't even know. Her breath hitched. Jack, I've spent years cursing fate, God, the fire, the walls, myself. But never once did I think about who might have tried. Who did try? He lowered his head. I wasn't supposed to stay. I just wanted to fix your oven. Do one thing right. Claire stood and walked around the table, Her fingers hovered above his shoulder before settling gently. "You didn't fail," she whispered. "You tried. That's more than most would have done." He looked up, stunned by the softness in her voice. She nodded, more to herself than to him. "If I can forgive life for taking him, then I can forgive you for trying to save him." And with that, the tightness in her chest unraveled, not all at once, but enough. Together, they stood in that kitchen, not as strangers bound by tragedy, but as survivors reaching for peace. Around them, the bakery waited, ready to rise again. The next morning, the kitchen glowed with soft amber light as the sun streamed through the high windows. Jack was already there, sleeves rolled up, dusted in flour and cinnamon. Claire walked in quietly, watching him knead dough with the kind of focus that made her chest tighten. Not with sadness, but something quieter, warmer. She didn't speak right away, just stood there, letting the smell of rising bread settle over her like a blanket. When she finally broke the silence, her voice was calm, clear. "Do you want to stay?" Jack turned, blinking. "Here? In the bakery?" She said gently. "In this town? In this life? With me?" He stared at her, flour still clinging to his cheek like a mark of belonging. "Even after everything?" Claire nodded. "Especially after everything." They spent the rest of the morning working side by side. He repaired the loose hinge on the cooler while she tested a new batch of cranberry orange scones. There was no need for grand speeches, just the quiet rhythm of two people rebuilding something, brick by brick, crust by crust. At one point, Jack reached into his satchel and handed her a folded paper. "I filed to reclaim my real name," he said softly. "Rowan is the name I took in hiding, but my real name, it's Jackson Reed. I wanted you to know." Claire unfolded the paper slowly. Her thumb brushed over the name. "Jackson," she repeated. "It suits you." He smiled faintly. "Do you think people will still come to the bakery once they find out?" "It was already due," Claire replied, setting the paper down. "Because of how the pastries taste, because of how you treat them. The rest? That's just noise." Later that afternoon, Claire invited some regulars to taste test the new batch. An elderly woman with silver hair declared the scones sinfully good, while a pair of teens asked to pre-order a dozen. When the last customer left, Claire sat by the window with a mug of coffee and stared outside as leaves scattered in the breeze. Jack joined her, setting down a plate, her favorite lemon tart. "Adjusted the sugar this time," he said. Claire took a bite, closed her eyes, and smiled. "Found it," she murmured. "Found what?" "Perfect note. It tastes like how spring feels after a long, gray winter." He laughed quietly. "You describe food like poetry." She opened her eyes, meeting his. "That's because it is, especially when it heals." As evening fell, the two of them stepped outside. The sky was brushed in lavender and gold. The lights inside the bakery flickered on behind them, illuminating the handwritten chalkboard that read, "Tomorrow's menu, baked with second chances." Claire glanced at him, her voice soft but sure. "I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I know this. Grief shaped me, but it won't define me. Not anymore." Jack nodded, sliding his hand gently into hers. "Then let's shape what comes next, together." He stood there for a long time, shoulder to shoulder, in the hush between day and night. Not chasing perfection, not erasing the past, but writing a new story. One evening from pain, baked in hope and served with a promise. That healing, like bread, takes time, but it always rises. Inside, the oven ticked softly, warm and waiting. And this time, it wasn't just Claire's bakery anymore. It was theirs. The morning of the festival dawned bright and golden, a rare warmth clinging to the October air. Downtown was transformed, banners strung from lampposts, booths blooming with harvest colors, the scent of cider and cinnamon drifting through the streets. Claire wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out onto the sidewalk, where Jack was already setting the bakery's table. Their creation, the Phoenix pie, sat cooling on a wooden tray. Its golden crust shimmered with a dusting of spiced sugar, and a delicate feather design had been etched into the top. Jack's idea, a symbol of rebirth. Claire had nearly cried when he suggested the name. Phoenix pie, she had whispered. From the ashes, something sweet. Now, as people strolled by and took notice, Claire felt her stomach tighten. Not with fear, but anticipation. They weren't just presenting a dessert. They were offering a piece of their healing. "I hope they like it," Jack said, adjusting the sign. "Thank you." "Help her up," Claire replied, because it came from something real. One by one, curious townfolk stopped at the booth. Some remembered Claire's lemon tarts. Others were drawn by the name, the feathered crust, or the scent of caramelized apples and rosemary, a surprising but comforting mix. A teenage girl with braces took a bite and closed her eyes. "It tastes like home," she said softly. Jack glanced at Claire, his eyes warm. "That might be the best review we've ever had." As the judging hour approached, the crowd grew thicker. Laughter, violin music, and the clang of kettle corn filled the air. Claire found herself scanning faces, half expecting nerves to rise, but they didn't. Not this time. She wasn't alone behind a folding table, clutching a tray of memories. Jack stood beside her, shoulders squared, ready for whatever came next. Then the announcer's voice rang out over the microphone. "And this year's first prize in the Harvest Bake-Off goes to the team from Bennett's Heartwarming, Claire Bennett and Jackson Reed, for their Phoenix." The crowd erupted in applause. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't won anything since high school. Jack grinned and lifted her hand like a champion. "Told you they'd love it." They received a small ribbon, a gift basket, and a framed certificate. But the real prize came later, after the booths closed and the crowd thinned. As dusk fell, fairy lights blinked on around the bakery patio. The soft sound of a local band playing filled the quiet streets. Claire stood near the edge of the dance space, arms folded, watching as couples swayed beneath the string lights. The warmth of the day had faded, replaced by that sweet chill that always signaled the start of true autumn. Behind her she heard footsteps. "AI?" Jack asked, holding out a hand. Claire looked at it, then up at him. The silence between them held no pressure, just an invitation. She placed her hand in his. They stepped onto the makeshift dance floor, feet shifting uncertainly at first, then falling into rhythm. The band played a slow, wistful tune, and Jack's palm rested lightly at the small of her back. Claire leaned in slightly, just enough to feel the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," she murmured. "Is not giving up on a place like this, or on a person like me." Jack shook his head gently. "You're the strongest person I've ever met. I didn't come here to rescue anyone. I think I came to find myself. And I found you." The lights above them glowed like tiny stars. They didn't speak again for a long while, just moved, surrounded by the soft hum of life returning to stillness. No grand declarations, no promises too heavy to keep. Just this presence, just this moment. Later that evening, Claire and Jack sat on the back steps of the bakery, their legs stretched out, the ribbon from the bake-off loosely tied around Jack's wrist. The glow of the festival still shimmered faintly across town, but here, behind the storefront, it was quiet. Peace. Claire passed him a mug of hot cocoa, and he took it with a soft smile. Their fingers brushed briefly, just enough to send a flicker of warmth up her arm. "You know," Jack began, staring up at the stars, "I never thought I'd stay in one place again, especially not a place like this." Claire leaned against the doorframe, mug nestled between her palms. "And what kind of place is this?" He glanced at her, eyes serious. "The kind that forgives, the kind that remembers, and still makes room for something new." She looked down at her feet, the familiar knot in her chest loosening with his words. "For a long time," she said, "this bakery was the only thing I had left of him, of us. I poured everything into the dough, the glaze, the routine, but it never filled the emptiness." Jack set his mug aside. "And now?" Claire hesitated. "It feels like something is beginning, not ending. Like I can bake something without guilt, sitting at the edge of every bite." Jack didn't speak for a moment, Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I wasn't going to show you this yet, but I submitted the Phoenix pie recipe to the regional bake journal. They loved the story behind it. They're going to publish it. Claire blinked. Wait, what? They said the name, the symbolism, the flavor. It all felt like hope, and they wanted to share it. Claire's eyes filled, but this time, the tears didn't sting. They settled like morning dew. He would have liked that, she whispered. Jack nodded. So would the people who never got second chances. The sound of a violin drifted faintly from down the street. Someone still playing under a tent, perhaps. Jack stood and extended a hand once more. Dance with me. Just one more. Claire laughed, a soft, startled sound. There's no one watching. Exactly. She set down her mug and placed her hand in his, letting him pull her to her feet. They swayed beneath the string of lights Jack had helped her hang last winter. Lights she almost hadn't bothered to turn on this year, but now they glowed. She rested her head against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, her heart didn't flinch from closeness. It leaned into it, welcomed it. I don't know what comes next, she admitted. We don't have to, he said. We just have to wake up tomorrow and make dough. Claire laughed again. And maybe coffee. You still burn the first batch. Achnaya. You do. Jack smiled, that rare, almost boyish grin she'd only seen a few times, the one that felt like sunrise. As the final notes of music faded into the night, they stopped dancing. But neither stepped back. Claire touched his jaw, her voice no louder than a whisper. Maybe next year we make 2 Phoenix pies. Jack's hand curled around hers. I'd like that. From inside the bakery, the soft ticking of the old kitchen clock carried through the air. A reminder that time was still moving, that grief could soften, that forgiveness could grow like yeast, slow but steady, rising when no one was looking. And maybe, just maybe, so could love. The morning after the festival, the town felt quieter, softer, like the air itself was catching its breath. Claire stood alone in the kitchen of the bakery, the early light slanting through the windows, brushing over the countertops like a memory. She was rearranging drawers, something she hadn't done in years, when her fingers paused on a familiar shape beneath a stack of old handwritten notes. She pulled it out slowly, her wedding ring. It was exactly as she remembered it. Simple gold, a barely there scratch across the band from when she'd once knocked it against a metal mixer in a rush. Her breath caught in her throat. It had been tucked away since the day after the funeral, hidden, not because she'd forgotten, but because she hadn't known how to move forward while holding it to it. Claire turned the ring over in her palm for a long time before reaching for a small wooden shadow box on the shelf above the counter. She opened it, smoothed the black velvet lining inside, and gently placed the ring in the center. Then she closed it and set it beside the framed photo of her late husband that always stood near the cash register. It wasn't letting go, it was placing it somewhere safe, acknowledging the love that had been, without allowing it to steal the future still waiting. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the roofline and cast golden light over the bakery floor, Jack returned from the farmer's market. He carried a small paper bag with new ingredients they'd planned to try in the next week's specials. But in his other hand he held something else, a small, leather-bound notebook with a ribbon around it. Claire looked up from kneading dough and raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" He handed it to her wordlessly. She untied the ribbon, opened the cover, and gasped softly. Inside were blank recipe pages, every one carefully outlined and labeled, just waiting to be filled. On the first page, in Jack's careful, uneven handwriting, were the words, "Bennett and Rowan, our recipe book." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "You made this?" He shrugged, suddenly shy. "I thought maybe we could start collecting the things we've made, together, not just pastries, memories, trials, joy." She traced a finger down the page. "This is the kind of thing I never let myself dream of again." "Well," he said, voice low and steady, "then maybe we write down the dreams too." Claire stepped around the counter, still holding the book, and stood in front of him. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator and the rhythm of the town beyond the window. "Found my old ring this morning," she finally said. Jack's eyes flickered to her left hand, wore it so earnestly. "I'm not wearing it," she added, "but I put it somewhere it could rest. And now, I think it's time I start writing in a new chapter." Jack nodded, emotion tightening his jaw. "Then, let's start with the first page." Claire turned to the second sheet, pulled a pen from behind her ear, and in elegant cursive wrote the title, "Jack's Redemption Rolls." She handed it to him. He read it, then looked at her with a smile that was somehow both humble and full of awe. "Let's make a life," he said quietly, "not just a bakery." Claire smiled back, heart wide open now. "Yes, let's." The next morning, the bakery opened to the usual clang of the bell, the hum of morning chatter, and the scent of cinnamon and cardamom in the air. But something felt different. Claire moved with a lightness Jack hadn't seen before. Something unspoken had shifted, softened. They worked side by side without needing words. He rolled dough, she glazed scones. At one point, he caught her humming. Not the sad, hollow kind he'd heard weeks ago, but a new melody, warm, hopeful, unfinished. During a quiet lull, Claire placed the recipe book on the counter and opened it between them. "I think we should add more than pastries," she said. "Maybe even the stories behind them." Jack's brow lifted. "You want to write stories too?" She grinned. "These recipes don't just feed bellies, they hold pieces of us. Maybe writing them down makes them last." He turned the page and started jotting down notes for a new creation, a pastry filled with roasted pears and honeyed lavender. "What's this one called?" Claire asked. He looked at her, thoughtful. "Second chances?" She blinked, a slow smile spreading across her lips. Perfect. They spent the next hour, scribbling, laughing, occasionally arguing over spices or names, but always returning to that notebook. It became more than just a cookbook. It was a quiet testament to healing, trust, and the kind of love that doesn't arrive with fireworks, but with a warm oven and flour on your cheek. Later that evening, as the bakery lights dimmed and the last customer waved goodbye, Jack and Claire stayed behind to clean. As she reached for a tray, Claire spotted something tucked near the cash register. It was a small card. In Jack's handwriting, it read, "Recipe idea, Claire's Courage Cake." She turned, surprised. "What is this?" Jack rubbed the back of his neck. "It's not a real cake, not yet, just something I've been thinking about." Claire stared at the note. What would it taste like? Something bold, like lemon, but comforting, like vanilla. Maybe with a hint of spice, something that lingers and reminds you it's there. She folded the card and tucked it gently into the back of the recipe book. "Help you bake it," she said. Their eyes met, and for the first time there were no ghosts between them, just the warmth of a shared oven and the still growing fire of something neither had expected, but both had started to trust. That night, Claire set the recipe book on her bedside table. As she turned out the light, she whispered to herself, "Let's make a life." And in the darkness, just outside the bakery, Jack looked up at the window with a heart finally at peace. 1 year later, the old bakery had become something new, not just in name, but in soul. The hand-painted sign above the door now read, "Second Rise Bakery," with a gentle tagline beneath it, "Where recipes heal and hearts rise twice." It had been Jack's idea, but Claire had insisted on writing it herself. The lettering wasn't perfect, like them. It was honest and unfinished in the best way. The inside had changed too. Light poured in through wide windows that used to be blocked by old, dusty shelves. Plants now sat in sun-kissed corners. A small bookshelf of handwritten recipes and community stories rested beside the entrance, free for anyone to read or add to. Children's drawings lined the wall near the register, some of cupcakes, some of firefighters, and one large crayon sketch of Claire and Jack who did a pie with a heart in the center. It was signed, Leah, a boy from the town whose father had once worked with Jack, and whose family now volunteered at the bakery on weekends. Claire stood behind the counter, tying on her new aprons, cream-colored with a small flame stitched into the corner. Not the kind that destroyed, but the kind that warmed. She looked out through the window and saw Jack across the street, lifting bags of flour from the delivery truck. His sleeves were rolled up, and even a year later, there was something about watching him in motion that made her pause. Not with longing or uncertainty anymore, but with quiet awe. They hadn't planned for any of this, but then again, nothing that truly mattered had ever been in the plan. When the bell above the door rang, Claire turned, ready with a smile, but the woman who stepped in made her breath catch. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, with hollow eyes and a look Claire had once worn herself. Grief clung to her like damp clothes. Her coat was soaked at the hem, and she looked around as if unsure why she'd walked in at all. Claire stepped out from behind the counter slowly, no apron, no barrier, just her. "Hi there," she said softly. The woman blinked at her. I don't know what I'm doing here." Claire nodded. "That's all right. Neither did I, the first time I came back after losing him." The woman's eyes filled instantly. "It's been 3 months." Claire reached behind the counter and returned with a small plate. A warm cinnamon roll rested on it, steaming slightly. "These redemption rolls," Claire said, her voice steady. "No magic in them. Just butter, sugar, and a little hope." The woman reached for it with trembling hands. Claire added gently, "And when you're ready, the bench by the window is the best place to sit and cry." The woman gave a watery laugh, then moved toward the window, holding the plate close like it might fall apart. Claire stood still for a moment, watching her. She didn't need to say more. Grief didn't want words, it wanted presence, and sometimes a warm roll. Later that day, when the shop quieted and the shop returned inside, Flower still dusting his arms, he found Claire at the back table sorting through mail. Among the envelopes was a donation form from a National Firefighter Scholarship Fund. Without saying anything, Claire filled in the amount, a large one. At the bottom, where the donor name was required, she paused only a second before signing, "Claire Rowan Bennett." Jack leaned over her shoulder and kissed her cheek. "Think they'll accept our pie recipe too?" he joked. Claire smiled. "Let's start with this." The next morning brought golden light through the bakery windows, the kind of soft glow that made sugar crystals sparkle and steam from coffee cups dance like fog. The smell of baked apples and warm vanilla swirled through the shop, and the bell above the door rang again and again with the rhythm of a life rebuilt customers. Laughter, footsteps. No longer just a bakery, Second Rise had become something else entirely, a quiet sanctuary. Claire had always believed healing came in layers. Like dough, it needed resting, folding, waiting. And that morning, as she glanced around the shop and saw familiar faces gathering with pastry boxes and mugs, she felt something she hadn't in years: wholeness. She moved to the community corkboard on the wall, pinning up a new flyer for a weekly support group that met in the back kitchen after hours. "For anyone learning to rise again," the flyer read. The first time they'd hosted it, only 3 people came. Now, the room was often full. Jack always baked something extra for those nights, usually lemon tarts or grief cookies, as he joked. Claire never corrected him. They both knew the power of laughter in the middle of ache. When she turned around, she found Jack holding something behind his back. "Where are you hiding?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Jack grinned and brought out a wrapped bundle. Inside was a new recipe card, one Claire hadn't seen. It read, "Claire's Courage Cake, best served on hard days. Requires equal parts truth and tenderness." She looked up at him, lips parting in surprise. "I wanted to write one for you," Jack said, "because every time I think of who held this place together, it's not the flour or the ovens, it's you." Claire blinked back tears. "You're not too bad with metaphors for a man who once only talked in half sentences." He chuckled. "I had to keep up with you." Later that afternoon, just as the sun began to dip into warm amber, they stepped outside the bakery to unveil something they'd both worked on for months. A polished plaque on the garden wall behind the shop. Carved into wood and bordered by ivy, the sign read, "Honor of second chances and the flames we rise from. Dedicated to all who bake their way back to life." Underneath, in smaller letters, "Claire Rowan Bennett and Jack Rowan, founders." As the town gathered around for cider and celebration, Claire noticed the young widow from the day before seated near the plaque, smiling faintly, a crumpled tissue in one hand and a half-eaten redemption roll in the other. It reminded Claire of her own beginning. Not the one where life shattered, but the one where she dared to build again. That night, in the quiet, after the crowd dispersed and lanterns flickered like sleepy stars, Claire and Jack sat on the back porch with a worn recipe book open between them. Most pages were still blank, but the first few told their story: burned tarts, rainstorms, apologies, forgiveness, and pie. Jack looked over and said, "So, what's the next recipe?" Claire rested her head on his shoulder. "Something simple, something true, something that takes time." He nodded. "Like us?" And inside the bakery, by the register, the neon "Open" sign dimmed to a soft glow. But above it, carved into the doorframe, one last message remained for every soul who passed through. Where recipes heal and hearts rise twice. And they did, every single day.